Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? All right, Wednesday, free agency. The league year officially begins for the NFL. The tampering period, though, has revealed an awful lot. Our buddy Sean Fazende, Fox 8 in New Orleans, good enough to join us for a few. How are you, man?
Doing all right. Busy day, but we're doing okay. How are you?
Not as busy as you, but I appreciate the time. Sean, walk me through how in the world Jameis Winston ends up back in New Orleans.
Well, that's a great question. And, the Saints made that offer, I guess, last week, or when that news leaked, was it Friday, that they were offering a chance to come back at a restructured contract, which is basically a pay cut where you lower your base salary and earn some money back with incentives, but we know it would be the number 2 quarterback. Now, look, this to me feels like a situation where perhaps the market wasn't quite as strong on the outside of New Orleans that maybe they thought. Obviously, at 29 years old, you wouldn't think Jameis is ready to just kind of concede being a backup at this part of his career, but looks like on the surface that the best deal he got was the Saints' 1-year, $4 million contract, and he returns, and he made a business decision, and the Saints gained some cap space, so it was one of the more unlikely win-win scenarios for the Saints and Jameis Winston, because if you'd have asked me this question a week ago, I would have said there is absolutely no chance Jameis Winston returns, but yet here they are. And I do wonder if the Saints were even a little bit surprised that he came back around and took their offer, especially since obviously the entire organization and locker room and everything else has moved in the direction of for Derek Carr as the franchise quarterback.
Sean, we could say the same about Michael Thomas as well. When they restructured his deal, it certainly appeared as though the end was the end of Thomas's time in New Orleans there. So is it the same situation where it was just a light market for Michael Thomas? I mean, surely he had to have some option out there aside from this 1-year deal with New Orleans.
Yeah, well, he's coming off 3 years of injuries, missed 40 games over the last 3 seasons. So I don't know that he just turned 30 years old. So surely there would have been a team that had some sort of market for his services. The Saints, though, offering that $10 million 1-year contract with probably very makeable incentives to get up to that $15 million. And look, when I was at Derek Carr's press conference Saturday, I left with my biggest takeaway. Wasn't thanking Mrs. Benson, wasn't being excited about joining the Saints. It was, my God, there is no way the Saints can move on from Michael Thomas now with the way Derek Carr spoke about him, because I just don't see how it was possible. And when that happened, kind of felt like the wheels were in motion for at least for one season, a Derek Carr Michael Thomas pairing. And maybe there is genuine excitement on Michael Thomas's part to play with a guy like Derek Carr. I don't know what his market was on the open on the open market, what he could have gotten, but if he settled in on a 1-year $10 million contract, then again, it could be the same situation like Jameis, where that's the best thing he got, but also perhaps he's excited to get back with a quarterback he feels like can help him get back to where he was, and the Saints get back to winning with some stability at that position.
Sean Fazende, Fox 8, is with us. So Jameis and Michael Thomas are returning. Let's talk about the guys that are leaving. And boy, it's an exodus defensively. I want to start with Caden Ellis, because it certainly felt, Sean, like he was going to be a major target after the season he had. So how did the Saints let him get away?
Well, on the open market, a guy like that, a young player who really came on strong towards the end of the season. He was second on the team in sacks, Matt. I mean, it was unbelievable. I didn't even realize that until I checked the stats. He came on strong. And there were whispers that the Saints knew once he hit the open market that perhaps he was going to get a little too expensive. And then, look, you saw what the Falcons paid for him. That was probably going to be – the Saints weren't going to come close to that. They have their starters in place, and Demario Davis and Pete Werner. We know Pete Werner has had an injury history, but so has Caden Ellis before this year. So, look, of the ones that have left, I think that one kind of stings the most, because I felt like there really was a ceiling there that was a little bit higher, and he was kind of entering the prime of his career. But, you can't keep everyone, and, they've made some tough decisions in the past. Some are right, some are wrong. I think of Trey Hendrickson as one that, maybe they rethink now, especially since Marcus Davenport, I'm sure you're going to ask me about, is going elsewhere this offseason. But he's in Atlanta, and the Saints probably may have to add a piece or two at that position just in terms of depth at the linebacker core.
Well, let's look. Onyemata's in Dallas as well, or in Atlanta as well. Excuse me. Let's talk about Davenport though, since you bridged it there. I'm not surprised, Sean, that Davenport would leave, especially when we saw some of the projected market value numbers for him, $20 million. I mean, that was absurd to think, and apparently the reality was absurd. He gets a 1-year, $13 million deal. Were the Saints not willing to offer him a 1-year prove-it deal?
Apparently not, at least not to that extent with the Minnesota Vikings. Again, I guess the market dictates. And look, the Saints had been frustrated with the injuries with him. I mean, every single year it was always potential. At some point, it's got to turn into production. It's a premier position. We know that. And it's a guy they invested heavily in when you talk about, trading up basically 2 first-round picks to go up and get him. And they kept waiting and waiting. Felt like he was getting close, but every time he kind of was getting close to that ceiling or, breaking through, he would get injured again. And look, at the end of the season last year, Carl Granderson, opposite of Cam Jordan, was the best defensive end on the team, opposite of Cam. And, that kind of says something about where they were at that position. In terms of, Peyton Turner's lack of availability / production and Marcus Davenport's lack of production. So they let a former first-round pick walk to Minnesota on a deal that doesn't seem crazy on the surface, or maybe it does, but all in all, they just chose they're not going to pay him that much, and he's off to Minnesota. It's only a 1-year deal, and I guess good luck staying healthy because it hasn't happened here in New Orleans with him.
Onyemata and Tuttle, a couple of interior guys that are staying in the division as well. Onyemata in Atlanta, Tuttle's going up to Carolina. Reaction there to those guys leaving New Orleans?
Well, it happened within the first, hour of the legal tampering period opening. And, last time I was on your show, Matt, I even asked you live on air if the Saints have a D tackle on their roster. I still don't know if they have one. They have even less now. So, and not completely surprising that both guys would sign elsewhere. It just leaves a massive hole at the defensive tackle position. But, Matt, they weren't paying Onyemata that kind of money, north of 30, and a guy that was been a little up and down since he signed that contract a couple of years ago. He finished strong last year, but he didn't have the totality of the year that they had hoped. And Shai Tuttle's a guy that they, developed from undrafted free agent and, into a decent starting piece of defensive tackle. But I think as a whole, that position underachieved greatly last year. So while they're going to have to stock that room, I don't think it's going to be terribly difficult to match that production from last year to this year, just because I just think overall that group just kind of underachieved a year ago.
Prince Emili is the only.
That's it.
It is
That's the one.
The singular,
right.
only defensive tackle under contract for the Saints. So, Sean, the obvious next question is: look, when free agency begins, the Saints are going to have to be spenders, but there's always this question: are you a spender in the first wave, or after the market is set, you spend in the second wave? And a lot of that has to do with your salary cap. And the Saints don't have a lot of space. So what do they do when the shotgun start happens on Wednesday?
Well, you'll see them add a veteran defensive tackle at some point, if not two. One could be a middle tier type free agent. One could be one of those veteran types that are on the kind of the last stop of their career. A guy in-house, Malcolm Roach, is certainly a possibility. He could return. Kentavious Street is another one that could play outside. He could play inside. But at 29, they're sitting in a pretty decent spot to draft a defensive tackle as well. But they've got to stock up. So they're gonna have to add at least 4 that they don't have right now currently on their roster, whether or not it's a guy that they had on their roster last year, like in Street or Malcolm Roach, go on the veteran circuit, which I think will happen. I'll just throw a name out there, like Sheldon Rankins, for instance, was available. I don't know if anything's popped since we've been talking on the air, but he's available as well. And then, you look in the draft, pretty decent year for the defensive tackle class. We'll add one. And, back in 2016, Matt, they drafted 2 defensive tackles, so that's not out of the question as well. But that's going to be the huge position of need for this team going forward. And it's not always the easiest position to find, so they got their work cut out for them.
Is there any other position that, aside defensive tackle, clearly, Sean, they don't have anything. They've got to go address the position. But is there any other position that you look at and say, okay, here is where the immediate glaring need is?
Yeah, running back. Absolutely running back. You don't know what's going to happen with Kamara's potential suspension. They need a running back anyway. You saw how much they missed that veteran or that second back a season ago because Ingram had really fallen off in terms of his production. I wouldn't be shocked if at some point they draft their quote-unquote future Kamara when Kamara eventually, moves on with, potential running back in this class. But they're going to have to add a veteran at some point, and it probably in the mode of more of a physical guy, a la Latavius Murray a couple of years ago. That can give him, 100-plus carries, 100-plus carries, 500, to 600-plus yards on the ground. That could really help their game.
Sean Fazende, Fox 8 on Twitter, at Sean Fazende, Fox 8. Man, they certainly have a lot of work to do with start of free agency and in the draft. Before you go, I'd love a thought on the NFC South. Anything that any team has done? I mean, obviously we know Carolina's going up to the number one pick, but do you like what any of these teams have done that maybe have positioned themselves?
Well, they all seem to like Saints free agents. We talk about Andy Dalton, the Falcons with Ellis, and David Onyemata, Shai Tuttle to the Panthers. And I could see Carolina being interesting with that number one overall pick, and they got their veteran insurance and Andy Dalton. The Saints certainly have their issues as well, but I still think right now, as I look at it, Matt, I think the Saints should be the favorite to win the NFC South. I'm not sure if you agree with me, but I think the clearest path to the top team in the NFC South goes through New Orleans.
They are the betting favorite right now, Sean, and barring something unforeseen between now and the start of the season, I would agree. But I think the question is, are you just the tallest short kid in that situation? But,
right.
We'll see how the rest of it all plays out. Gets underway in earnest on Wednesday with the start of the league year. He's Sean Fazende. Busy day. Fox 8 in New Orleans. On Twitter at Sean Fazende, Fox 8. Y'all give him a follow. Thanks as always, man. We appreciate you.
All right, bro. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.